Tonight we're here with Dave Munkittrick. Dave Munkittrick is a contributing editor for Woodworkers Guild of America. But then, Dave, tell us a little Dave bio. What's your background?
Started woodworking right out of college because there were no jobs back in 1978, and I've been doing it ever since. So about 35 years now. Stint at American Woodworker magazine. Spent about
Did a lot of writing
9
for
years
AW.
there. Yep. And now with Woodworkers Guild of America.
And you do a lot of custom work. You've made some
Yep.
beautiful pieces in your shop. Dave's shop is about 10 miles from here, so we cross paths every once in a while. And then I remember that game table being an absolutely beautiful piece of furniture. A lot of veneer work, right?
Yes.
And
A lot of
inlays.
veneer work.
So tonight, if you've got questions, Dave's a little bit more of a hand tool guy than I. My joke is always my hand tools are behind a glass door and it says in case of emergency, break glass. Dave's are a little bit more accessible. Dave knows a lot more about finishing than I do, a lot about shellac. I spray lacquer, then I spray more lacquer, that's about it. So Dave knows more about finishing, veneering, that kind of stuff. So I got any questions in those directions, lay it on us. Here comes one for you, Dave. Shadow box question. John says, I want to make a shadow box.
Okay.
Is there any joinery I should not use? Also, have you ever seen someone put a shelf in a shadow box?
Well, the shadow box is essentially a display box, right? It's a display thing.
Like kind of a box,
Yeah.
right? That looks like
And
this.
my
Probably not that
philosophy
deep,
with
but
if you're displaying something, you want that to show. So you don't want to show off and make a very fancy box.
So modest joinery
it
would
should
be your
plain,
advice.
and I would say not visible. Probably not through dovetails or anything like that. Yeah, just make it ordinary and make what's being displayed shine.
prominent.
And shelving, I mean, I don't know what he's displaying, but shelving is certainly part of it. If you got light in there, you want to have maybe glass shelves so the light can get through.
A lot of options.
Yep.
But a lot of that shelf concept comes down to what you're putting in
What
there.
you're putting in there, that should be your starting point. What am I putting in there, and then build around that.
Okay, so yeah, no exclusions really on joinery, but I go with Dave. Nothing too showy, so that the show piece is what's really highlighted. All right, Linda said, I'm going to hold off on Linda's question. We're going to come back to it because it's going to require a move. Russ says, watched your videos on CNC and would like to know more about the software used. I'm not great with computers and would consider myself a novice. What's the learning curve? So go ahead.
This is an area where George has a lot more experience than
Okay,
me.
so with the CNC machines, it's V-Carve Pro is a very prominent piece of software that the CNC machines use. And my story is that I got my first CNC machine, which is over there, that's why I'm looking over there, 3 years ago, something like that. And up to that point, I had never done any design work on a computer. I'm still learning SketchUp today. I can barely use it. So my launch into designing on the computer was V-Carve Pro. Lo these many years later, I'm really comfortable with the design work. There is a learning curve, but if you want to use the machine, you'll get over that. We've got a lot of videos that include screen capture of using the design software. V-Carve themselves, Vectric is the mothership, is the software company that produces V-Carve. They've got a lot of tutorials. So there's a lot of support out there. There are places, including this shop, that offer classes where you can come to and do design and run a machine. So that's another approach. So overall, Russ, that was right?
Can I ask a question?
You can ask a question.
Do they have like a plug and play type thing? Like if you wanted to make a star pattern on a piece of wood, can you buy that, plug it in, and then
You
when
can,
goes,
there are designs, there's 3D clip art you can buy, but you're gonna still have to know how to use the software because you need to know how to create the tool path for you that will produce those cuts. So there's some stuff in the can, but you still gotta learn the software. All right, how about this one? I tried cutting miters on a bandsaw,
Okay.
and this is from Marcus, and Marcus might be in the UK or something because it's miters R-E-S instead of E-R-S, which is, I think it's kind of a British thing. I tried cutting miters on a bandsaw with a new blade to make a box. The wood is 5 inches wide, and I'm using a miter gauge for precision, but the cut seems to drift into the wood, leaving a slight concave near the middle. The result is a gap when I join the boards together. Blade tension is good. What could be the issue? Is it the guides? He's in cedar and a 1/2 inch blade. So you can answer the question, but my interpretation is going to be that Marcus is taking a 5 inch board on edge and cutting a miter with a miter gauge. What say you?
Well, if I was going to do it on the bandsaw, first of all, I would do it on a table saw if I had a table saw. It's just,
or a sliding miter saw if that's an option.
if it's large enough.
Okay.
Right? But I would put your table at the 45 and run your wood through this way with the miter gauge behind it.
I agree.
Keeping it a square cut.
So you're not cutting such a
if you're getting,
huge piece.
Right. And
at one time.
if you're getting any kind of a bow in there, you might check your tension. Could be that you just need to crank up that tension a little bit.
Well, and part of it, I'm wondering if this is almost an inattainable, like if it's a bandsaw blade with a lot of drift and you're in the miter gauge slot, then the miter gauge is going to track this way no matter what. But if the blade is drifting a little bit, it's going to go kerflooey. So this is a tough,
well, and it's easy to get a bow in something like that when it's that tall. If he's doing it on edge like that, I mean, I would assume he's doing it like
yeah. So you say your tension's good, Marcus, and the blade is new, so you're doing everything right. So kind of the drift of the blade can be the only thing. So maybe and there's nothing, you can compensate for drift with a fence, you can't compensate for drift with a miter gauge. So I would consider angling the table and cutting the board on the flat, just like Dave said.
Yep, and check your tension. You know, it could be increasing the tension will help, and make sure your guides are
might have a tension deficit.
Right. Yes. The guides are very important too.
Yeah.
So make sure they're up snug on your blade.
Kissing the blade.
Yep. Top and bottom.
All right, Ken says, just got a new CNC, it's CNC night. Just got a new CNC, any tips? I don't know, how do you get to, oh, now I can't remember the joke. How do you get to the Grand Hall, practice?
How do you get to Carnegie
How do you get to Carnegie Hall, yeah. So I would get some scrap wood, get it on the machine, get some projects you want to make that maybe you don't care too much about. In 3 years, I've broken one bit, so it's not, if you're careful, it's not that big a threat. And watch all of the CNC videos on WWGOA as a starting point, and you can grab some of those projects. There's step-by-step design work, step-by-step setting up the machine. There's a bunch of videos on GOA that will walk you through that.
So what breaks a bit too much of it?
No, what I did was, I did something on the machine that did not require the spindle, the router, to be running. I actually had a magic marker in there using it as a plotter, which is an interesting CNC thing. So then, having forgotten that, when I went to use the machine, the bit traversed, entered the wood, and of course wasn't spinning. Pretty hard to cut. You know, it's not a drag, it's a bit. So it was kind of a drag, but it broke a 1/4 inch bit. Here's a good question for you. John says, I was taught not to lay a plane on its face for fear of chipping the blade. I've watched many videos and have seen almost everyone put the plane face down. Some would quickly move the plane to its side, or in the next frame, it would be, I don't even own a hand plane.
Yeah, you do.
It doesn't have an iron in it. Here's one that's actually got an iron. All right, but bust this myth, Dave, what's the deal? So, one professional woodworker said,
here's what I do. Why set this nice blade that you've labored so hard to get just right and tuned just right? Why stick it, even if it's a wooden bench?
Because it is projecting out from the sole.
Why not put it on its side? I always put it on this side.
You're erring on the side of caution.
Yep.
Yeah, I would agree. Why take the risk? That's a hand plane, right?
It is a hand plane, yeah. It's even a wooden one. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, it was a gift from somebody who doesn't know me very well.
Is it sharp?
I don't know. It could be. So yeah, myth busted, or no, myth not busted. Lay it on its side.
I would lay it on. Why not?
Yeah. Joe says, I have trouble cutting large panels of plywood, can't seem to get a clean edge. Les, luck would have it, Dave did a video that accompanied an article about cutting sheet stock and not using your table saw for it. And it's a great technique of, if I remember right, cutting oversize and then flush trimming with a straight edge to get a great edge. So after the fact, when I'm sitting and answering questions, I'll link to that content of Dave's. Blade selection, if you are on a table saw, blade selection is important. 10-inch blade, 60 tooth or 80 tooth, right?
And sharpened, what's the problem he's having? It's just not a clean
Can't get a clean edge.
So
Can't seem to get a clean edge.
It could be that the blade isn't sharp, or he needs a new blade, sharp blade. I like 1/8 inch. I'm not a big fan of the 3/32, although I do use them in certain circumstances. But I just find there's more stability in that 1/8 inch blade,
Okay.
especially if you're taking a heavy cut. I mean, if we're talking about plywood, not such a big deal.
So, so if you're on a table saw, blade select, sharp blade, that's first. Blade selection, 60 or 80 teeth.
Yep.
Alternate top bevel, ATB, is going to give you the best cut,
Cross cut.
best cross cut.
Yep.
So that's all considerations you can rule
The
in.
other thing would be make sure your fence is parallel with your blade, or very, very close.
Yeah,
to
so
it.
you're not
Sometimes
walking.
people tow it out just a wee bit, but yeah, you don't want it to be going like this, because that will give you a rough edge.
Yeah. Christopher says, what's the brand of hearing protection you use in most of your videos? Looks convenient and comfortable. So this is a two-part answer. For many years, talking off camera, for a lot of years I used these.
That's what I use.
This is Sense Guard.
Yep.
I think I'm very funny. These are available, I'll put a link, these are available in the WWGOA shop. More recently, I switched to these. Dave probably hasn't even seen these yet. This product is called ISOTunes, and it's 27 decibels of hearing protection, and it Bluetooth connects to my phone. So I'm a big music while I work guy. So tools are running, these are in, I'm listening to music. If my phone rings, I can answer the phone through these. And the other thing that's maybe the coolest about it, it's got a noise canceling feature. So if I'm running, if I'm on these and I'm running a vacuum and I'm talking to Ginny, who's running the camera, she can hear me talking, but it cuts out the vacuum in the background. So it allows me to keep working while I'm on the phone, overcoming that ambient noise of a lot of the tools. So I'll link to those two things. SenseGuard and ISOTunes are my faves.
And these are my faves. I have tried these, but I've got a problem with foam not staying put in my ear. These do it because they've got a little bit of a clamp pressure to them.
Yeah.
So
And this is a standard. You roll up the foam, you shove it in there, it expands. You know. But yeah, it's a
personal preference thing. So these are my faves. These are George's.
I just had one, and then I scrolled. Right. That's hearing protection. Whoops. It's coming.
Gotta love this technology.
Yeah. I'm getting back to it. Joe cutting scene. I just had one. Hearing protection we did. Okay, here we go. When making cabinets and you add extra on the face frame, on the end is what he says, but I'm assuming the face frame. What do you use to trim the face frame when you're doing the install and you're about to kiss a wall? What do you do to make it right?
So is he talking about having a scribe on
Yeah, I'm assuming. I mean, the question's, it does say scribe,
Yeah.
When you have extra on the end, what do you use to trim it?
Yeah.
What do you use?
It depends. If it's an uneven wall that's doing this kind of thing, then I go with a jigsaw and a file and just work it. Well, first you got to
Made me throw up in my mouth a little.
First you got to scribe, the hand tool thing.
Wow.
I mean, you may not need the.
I use a belt sander. I scribe it, and then I use a belt sander with a pretty fine grit, like 120 grit. I have never hand filed a face frame in my life. So
Well, rasp.
I have never rasped a face frame in my life. But there you
You
go.
have a lot more control.
That's why there's
a belt sander.
That's why there's two of us here. So jigsaw to get it close, file to finish,
And a tube of caulk.
and a tube of caulk. And I'm all about belt sander right from the get-go.
Or a
So
big tuba cock.
I'm very good with the belt
I
sander.
bet you are.
Katie asks,
I'm
are you
afraid
gonna
of those things.
do any bowl turning classes? Yes, there's two here on the calendar in January. One is a Friday night, one is a Saturday morning. So there'll be, I was gonna make a bowl movement joke, but I probably
You got a
shouldn't.
bowl on your lathe
There's a
right
bowl
now?
on the lathe right now, that's not from a class. I'll show you in the class, everybody does a bowl kind of like this. Dave's a very avid turner as well, so good night for turning questions. So yeah, on the Vondriska Woodwork site, the bowl turning classes are on there. Rick says, various techniques to properly attach a laminated top to a woodworking bench project. I wonder if he means laminated like plastic laminate,
Or I think he means
or laminated like this.
This is what I would think. but-
Well, you can, yeah, we can't really get the camera low, but here, let's do this, Dave. You lift that in, because we can go off quite a ways. And then Jenny, can you get to a point where you can just see this black thing right there if you tilt down just a little bit? And I'll just talk them through what's cooking here. It's probably really a black hole of light down there. You with me? Yeah, so this is a southern yellow pine top. This is a piece of like 3x3 angle iron. And the key that you can't see under here, there's a lag screw right here. And that 3/8 lag screw is in a like 5/8 diameter hole, which I did. Why, Dave?
Because it's going to move. It's
Yeah,
going to
the-
expand and contract.
We gotta let that top move seasonally, expand and contract. So that lag bolt is actually sliding back and forth in that slightly oversized hole. And this has been this way for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, maybe more, with no cracks in the top. So that's an approach. Anything else you can think of? Let's go back down. If you step on that pedal, we can step on the pedal and then lift. That's good. What else do you like?
Well, no, I mean, if it's a butcher block or a solid wood top, obviously you've got to allow for that expansion and contraction.
Don't fix them firmly in place.
Nope. Don't just screw it down with a cross piece.
Here's a finishing question for you. How do I avoid blotchiness when staining soft woods like knotty alder?
Well, the best way to do it is to first put a wash coat of shellac on, and usually most of the shellac you get in the can is about a 3-pound cut. So if you thin that 50% with some more alcohol, it's a nice thin coat of shellac, and that'll seal up the open pores that are taking the stain more aggressively and causing the dark spots versus the light.
This is the most counterintuitive thing I ever learned from Dave, which is to pre-finish your wood, basically with shellac, but a diluted shellac.
Yeah, not
and then,
always, but
well, no,
yeah.
but to avoid the blotchiness,
if you want an even color, that's the way to do it.
and then just a white scuff, and then stain over the shellac. It's amazing. And even if it's not knotty alder, but you know how you put stain on end grain and it's like 8,000 times darker than the face?
Yeah.
So don't shellac the face, only shellac the end grain. And when you stain everything, the color will be stupid uniform, really uniform. All right, I interrupted you. So what else?
That's
so
all right.
Wash coat of shellac.
Wash coat of, actually, to back up a little bit, I would say go real fine on your sandpaper. The smoother and more polished you can get a soft wood like that, the less the blotchiness is going to happen anyhow. But you add the wash coat on top of that, and it'll do a nice job.
And in addition to picking on alder, you would do this on maybe maple,
Pine.
birch,
No,
pine.
well, yeah, maybe not so much maple, but you could. Yep.
Okay.
But birch certainly. Yeah.
And the key is de-wax shellac? Is that critical for this?
It is if you want a top coat with anything else besides shellac.
In the commercial form of de-wax shellac is Zinsser Seal Coat. A lot of home centers sell it. You can buy it on Amazon.
Which is getting harder to find now, I've noticed.
Oh, really?
The seal coat, but their can of white shellac now is wax free.
Okay.
But their spray of white shellac is, and I think they call it.
There's one in here I can look.
Yeah,
I think there's one in there I can look and see.
And anyhow, that's wax free, but if you buy it in a can, it looks as an identical label, but that has wax in it. It's kind of confusing. I don't
Okay.
know why they do that.
Thurman asks, how do you figure how many finger joints to make on a given width of board to end up with evenly spaced fingers? But I don't think that's really the question. I think the way I would think about it is, I want to do 1/2 inch fingers. So then the width of the board has to be in even increments of a 1/2 inch.
Yeah.
And then you're going to come out with a pin on one end and a socket on the other end. And whether that's 3/8 fingers or 3/4 fingers, or so decide the finger size first, and like the smaller the scale of the project, the smaller the fingers.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fine way to do it. And you could also just, you know, it takes a little bit of math to figure it out, but you can decide what size of fingers you want, like you were saying, and rather than dictate the size of the piece, you could say, well, I've got a piece I want it to be this big, and I want to have approximately 1/2 inch, and then you can work it, and you'll have to fudge it up and down a little bit just to get it, the spacing to work out right.
So the potential downside of that is the benefit to saying I want to do 1/4, 1/2, 3/8, whatever, is you can easily set up a dado head or a router bit that is 1/4, 3/8, 1/2. Where if you're going custom size,
It gets a little
your jig is going to be a little funkier, your setup's going to be a little funkier. But yeah, that'd be the other way to do it, is take the width of the board and divide it by whatever, 17, and whatever number you come up with is the width of your
And a
fingers.
dado blade, you should be able to adjust.
Dados you can adjust. Recommendations for hearing protection for those with hearing aids, and particularly behind the ear hearing aids. I mean, the muff's going to be a problem, right? Because
Yeah,
it's probably not going to capture over that. Take out your hearing aid and put these in,
I would think, or
or
other
the
ones.
sense card.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't. Thankfully, so far, neither of us are
Yeah.
wearing them.
And
So
I'm just not familiar enough with hearing aids. I think some of them have very small parts that go into the ear, right? So
But
maybe,
he says behind the ear, so
Yeah.
I think, I'm envisioning a plastic
yeah,
gizmo back
what
here.
I'm thinking is if the thing that amplifies is a small little, I don't know what that is, but you might be able to get a foam,
Oh, like a filler piece.
yeah, you know, just a roll of foam earplug in.
Okay. So Rick, I wonder if this is his question. Yeah, it is. So Rick must be building a workbench, because he goes on to ask, what are the proper techniques to attach it's the same question, laminated workbench to the stretchers? So oversized hole in the stretchers, so it can
Yep.
move, and then,
Or a slot. I mean,
Or a
just
slot.
that,
And
you
would
can,
you go with
can
a-
anchor, if you want one end to always be the same, the overhang, you can anchor it on
One
one
edge.
end or one edge, and just make your slots.
The
on
other
other
end
side.
float.
Yep.
lag screws,
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. And I'd put a washer on them so
so it can
they'll
slide.
slide easier.
And don't tighten the schnout out of it, because
Right.
you want the washer to have the ability to,
Yep.
especially wooden stretcher, if you put an impact wrench on there, then that washer is going to sink in the wood, and you're going to remove its ability to slide back and forth. So then one step further, like a fender washer, as opposed to a washer, fender washers are maybe twice as big as a conventional washer. You'll give it even more ability to slide. I'm finally getting a shop separate from the garage. Way to go, Monty!
Wow.
The cabinets I'm placing in the shop will be made of hickory. What finish would you suggest?
Whatever you want.
Whatever you want.
Shellac.
Shellac.
Yes.
I don't know. I'd spray lacquer
Lacquer.
out of my HVLP gun. It's beauty's in the eye of the beholder, baby. I would, I don't
Especially
know.
for a shop, I just wouldn't spend a lot of time on it. I mean,
Yeah.
they're gonna get beat up. So
And it depends on your environment. I mean,
Yep.
I can spray, so I spray.
maybe an oil.
Yeah, a wipe-on Watco natural oil or something is really
Water-based
user-friendly.
poly would be quick.
Yeah, there's not really a right or wrong. It's just
Yeah.
going to depend on your environment and what you're trying to get. Any experience with a belt-driven CNC? No, sir, Ron. No, can't speak to that one. I've cut several 3D scenes on the CNC. How can I finish these where they are not plain, but so the 3D will stand out, accenting the scene? Airbrush, hand painting. That would be. I'm gonna feed you this question, and then I'm gonna go get a piece so we can talk about this. Robert says, I have a beautiful inlay end table. Over the past few winters, dry air in the house has caused the inlay edges to cup. Any suggestions?
Okay, well,
So, yeah.
by cup, I assume you mean maybe they're peeling up. And I don't know if this is an older piece, in which case it's probably put down with hide glue. The beauty of hide glue is you can re-amalgamate it just by adding some warm water in there and clamping that whatever's coming up back down again. If it's a bubble in the middle, you might want to just make a little razor blade slit in the bubble and get some glue in under there and press it back down that way. Either of those techniques would work well.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to Sam's question. I've cut several 3D scenes on the CNC. How can I finish them so they're not plain but they stand out? So something like this. Ginny's doing a zoom. 3D carving, and back to our CNC questions before, this is not something I modeled or created. This is in the can, in the VCarve software. Very easy to drag and drop it into your design surface and go. So I think what Sam is talking about here, you can see it, is that the bear just kind of blends into the background. And I don't know, I mean, kind of an only real recourse, one recourse there would be to hand paint this so it's a different color. I've done stuff where, and I don't have anything here that shows this, but this is a piece of cherry, put a piece of maple veneer over it, then do the cutting. Now what'll happen is the through cut on the letters means the cherry is going to show through the maple. The through cut through the maple here on the 3D means that the 3D is going to show through the maple. Now we're not particularly accenting the 3D, but that it takes very little to put the veneer on there, and it's a really neat look when you cut through it and you get that contrast. It really makes the letters pop.
And you can do that just by painting the surface too. Right?
Sure, so you could paint it beforehand.
Yep.
In fact, like this,
Yeah. For lettering.
which is a very true expression. Never slow down, never grow old, baby. That's you and me, Dave. The whole board was painted, and then the letters were cut, so that helps make the letters stand out from the back. All right, let's, Ginny, go. I'm going to make you spin around because we've got this benchtop planer question, and I want to address that while we can. So we're going to walk toward that yellow DeWalt planer. I'll gaff your cords for you. And then let's get some show and tell stuff. Sort of.
Something to plane.
Well, yeah. So grab your sense card things maybe. Why don't you let's do this. All right. So the question is about avoiding snipe on the planer. And Dave, you actually have a big stationary planer, right? You're not.
It's not, well, it's a 13-inch, but it's cast iron.
Yeah, it's not a
real big.
lunchbox planer, but. And then why don't you just describe Snipe and what it is? I'm going to go get the clicker for the dust collector.
Well, Snipe is typically just a little, instead of getting a nice smooth surface like you see here, the knives will actually dig in a little bit and cause a little bit of a divot. Usually at the very end when it's coming out the planer after it's done surfacing.
So particularly on benchtop planers, what makes this happen is that on benchtop planers, the head is going up and down, the table stays in place, and that's not uncommon with planers in general, but what happens, that causes snipe, particularly on benchtops, is that the material hits the first roller, and that causes the cutter head to do this, to cock a little bit. So when that lead edge goes under the knife is down a little bit, and this is, kind of microscopically, but thousandths of an inch, but that's what's causing the snipe. So the head cocks down a little bit, we get an overcut, a snipe. When this goes under the second roller, everything is nice and level, then it feeds out the backside. Now it's only under the second roller, and the cutter head does this. It falls on this side. That causes snipe on the lead edge. So with a lot of benchtop planers, they've got some kind of a cutter head lock. And when that's engaged, that part right there on this DeWalt, when that cutter head lock is engaged, it locks the head rigidly in place. So using that is an answer. If you don't have a cutter head lock, then what we're about to do is another way, which is boards that are all the same thickness. I've got 3, only one of which is my target board. This is the one I want. So what happens is the first one becomes a sacrificial board. That the cutter head does its cocking on that one. Then the second one gets a perfect cut because it's butted to the first one, and then we chase it with a third one, looking kind of like...
So on another way to do that, I mean, if this is the board you want, just cut your stock a little bit long.
Yeah.
You end up chopping off the ends with wherever your snipe is. But
Yes, because you'll learn pretty fast, like your planer snipes the first 2 inches and the last 2 inches or whatever. So if you cut all your boards 4.5 inches too long, you can take that waste off the end. This is my new clicker. We'll
can
see
I
if
just
it
say
works.
one other thing that
You
helps?
fire away, Dave.
It's, if you got a longer, these are short boards obviously, but if you have a longer board, it helps to give it just a little bit of lift when it's going in. So what George was saying, it doesn't tip that cutter head as much. So you lift a little bit on that end, and when it comes out here and it's just on that outfeed roller, just give it a little lift there too, and a lot of times
Yeah, good support both ends.
that'll eliminate the snipe. At least it does on mine. I don't know about the DeWalt.
As you can see from my rapid movement there, on short boards like this, you got to move pretty fast to keep everything fed, because it is critical that they're end to end to end, otherwise you're not going to gain from the snipe.
And I don't know if you can see it, but you got a little snipe there on the, it's a little hard to see. But.
Little overcut, and in all honesty, I find this particular DeWalt isn't bad. It's rare that I actually lock the cutter head, because it does okay. So we gave you what, 2 or 3 things there. Yep. 1, good support in feed and out feed. 2, cut your boards overly long so that you can cut the snipe out when you're done.
Usually when you're planing, you're prepping
it's still
your
in the
stock,
rough condition.
So.
Yeah. 3, sacrificial boards, leading and trailing. Net on benchtop planers, you don't have adjustment that allows you to take the snipe out. On big stationary planers, you can control the tension on in-feed and out-feed rollers individually, front to back, left to right, and that will help you get the snipe out on stationary planers. But we don't have that option here.
And sometimes they have bed rollers too, which I don't think this does.
They're not on this one. Okay. Oh, we got to do this, a brief commercial timeout. So many thanks to Titebond for sponsoring our monthly lives and keeping this event free for you. They've really been great about being behind this, and we've had a really long track record with them. So big thanks to Titebond. And it being 20 to 8, the other thing I like to do at this time is, here comes Jenny with endorsing our commercial. Nice.
They make great glue too.
They make great glue. Is ask people where they're watching from. It's always interesting to hear, and you're going to be amazed, Dave. I mean, like Buenos Aires in Australia, all over the United States, but really all over the world. We have quite the international following. Okay, there's the 3D question. When I use a power hand planer, it seems to take off wood no matter what. Is this normal? I'm very new to woodworking. Use a power hand planer, it takes off wood. Isn't that what it's supposed to do?
Yeah, I don't know what he's using it for. I use a power hand planer if I've got a big slab piece of wood and I want to true it up.
Let's go back, Jenny, and Dave uses a planer a lot. So this would be we can do a little education here. This is my real big one.
Whoa! Well, I don't use it a lot, I wouldn't say, but I do use it. I have a much smaller one.
But give them the once over on the biodynamics of what that is for people who don't know what we were even talking about.
Oh, well, this is much like the planer we just ran, or it's actually more like if you think about a joiner here.
Can you give us a little zoom, Jenny, on the machine?
And this is your in-feed side. This is the part that goes up and down. This stays stationary and should be right in line with your blade. So this is what controls the depth of cut. If you're having a hard time controlling it, I mean, just take as light a cut as possible. That's always the thing. And like I said, what I use it for is if I got a big twist in the board that's too big for my joiner, I only have an 8-inch joiner, I'll use this to take off the high spots, create a flat that can go through my planer.
And I have found, so I've used this, I did a slab table not too long ago, and I used the planer to do a lot of leveling on the slab. And it is, you have to be careful with your feed. You want this front platen down when you start, because if you're feeding crooked, you're going to cut crooked. So it takes some practice. It takes some muscle memory to get this right.
This guy's a monster.
It's a 7-inch cutter in that one. It's nice that it's so wide, because you know, a 3-inch cutter, you're making more passes. There's a greater likelihood you're going to do this.
And I think what he may be getting at, as I know with mine, is you can't just create a nice smooth surface like you have here. You'll see ridges. Kind of tracks, ridges. Yeah. That's just the nature of the thing. It's a fairly rough.
It's not like sending it through a planer or a drum sander.
And originally they're designed just to trim a door edge quickly and easily.
Or potentially scribe face frame. It would be tough.
I
would do a belt
sander. If it was a nice even belt.
A nice straight cut. So yeah, 1, practice. 2, don't expect to get, I think we'll both agree, don't expect to get a dead flat surface out of a handheld planer, like at least in our hands. You know, maybe there's somebody who's better at it, but
it probably is.
In some bar and restaurant establishments, there's a coating on the bar surface that appears to be thick and clear, almost as if it was poured on instead of brushed on. What is it?
It's probably just that, the pour on bar top type finish.
It's amazing.
Yeah, the good stuff.
Keep talking us.
The good stuff really holds up well. There are less expensive versions that end up being kind of soft and tacky. I'm sure you've seen that at restaurants too, where the tabletop just seems like you can put your nail in it.
This is, what you're looking at there is 2-part epoxy. The product is a 2-part epoxy, resin and hardener. You mix it up, you literally pour it out, it self-levels. That's what's in here. I made the frame, put the back in it, painted the back black. You have glare, is that the issue? Put the Pentagon items in there. This is from when I taught at the Pentagon. And then poured that product over the top. And the coolest part out of this is this had bubbles in it, and you get the bubbles out by passing a propane torch over the top. And it's not heat, it's the carbon monoxide, right, is the byproduct of combustion. Please don't overly correct me if I'm doing it. It's either carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide. It's carbon monoxide, I think. Anyway, the byproduct of combustion of using the propane torch,
which would be both, probably,
has a chemical reaction with the epoxy, and it pulls the bubbles out, and that's how you get it so crystal clear like this one is. So it's just, a lot of places it's just called bar finish. It's something that's available on Amazon and retail stores. West System Epoxy, I'm sure, has one.
One caveat with that, I did a chess board top with that stuff, and it worked out beautiful, but make sure everything's clean, because I got a little tiny piece of wood in there and I tried to pick it out, and you could just see where I picked it out.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll tell you my horrible story on this particular thing. This is not the patch that was in here when I started. So I had everything set, I poured it in there, and the patch that was in there bled, like completely bled out. And so the resin, the epoxy is wet, but it's got like a 12-hour cure time. So I'm standing there looking at this, and these 2 patches I could replace. This visitor badge that I got at the Pentagon, there's no getting that back. So I took a pair of tweezers and I pulled the patch out, ran to the house, got a replacement, brought it back here, sprayed it with lacquer, heat gun to dry it, sprayed it with lacquer, heat gun to dry it, put like 4 coats of lacquer, heat gun in between, shoved that one through the epoxy, and then reworked it with a propane torch, and it looks like this.
That's a good rescue.
Yeah, it was a crazy save. I can't believe I got away with it. Okay. What kind of finish would you use for heat resistance? I'm making trivets on which you will set hot pans.
The best for heat is polyurethane.
Okay. So a little bit of a pain on a trivet because you got all those, it looks like a waffle cut from both sides.
And there are the pre-catalyzed lacquers and things, but that's pretty hot.
What do you think about like a Danish oil on a trivet? Or you think it would just suffer from the heat too much?
It probably would, but I mean the beauty of an oil finish is it's easy to fix and touch up.
Because it'd sure be nice. I mean, I made some trivets and I poured oil in a foil pan and then I just dipped the trivet and hung it up and let it drip until the oil was done dripping. And I've been using it a couple months and it's okay. But Dave, I mean, without question, poly is the greatest protection.
For heat,
But oil is probably the easiest to apply to something like a trivet. Where do you get plastic laminate? Can't find any locally. Mickey Mouse. Oh, this is unrelated. I'll say that after. Plastic. I mean, I've got hardware suppliers I'll order plastic laminate from if I need, like if I'm doing a job and I need a particular laminate the customer picked. But here, the home centers sell kind of a limited inventory of laminate. But it's, I just did, like I'm looking at a cabinet I just built for a video we shot last week, and that plastic laminate came from Home Depot. In a 30-inch by 48-inch piece. And then he goes on to say, John says, Mickey Mouse ears hearing protection work great over hearing aids. When they're Bluetooth enabled, they are as good as the ones George uses. So there's an option for hearing protection. And
not familiar with the Mickey Mouse.
Well, I think he must mean the big cans.
Big muffs. Yeah.
Is it worth replacing knives with a helical head or simply buying the planer that's already got it built in?
Well, it depends on what kind of planer you have. Certainly, yes. I mean, it's expensive. I retrofitted my 8-inch joiner was from straight knives to a helical head, and that was worth it because now I can do man-made products on my.
What did the head cost?
I can't remember.
But I think it's expensive. In the hundreds of. It's like $300, $400, $500.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. It was. But to buy a new joiner with it in would have been quite a bit more.
Yeah, so I think like where Dave's saying is don't try to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. If the jointer isn't a great joiner, don't buy a $500 cutter head.
But if you have a real nice, industrial planer, it might be worth doing.
Yeah.
They certainly are nice. I mean, they last a long time.
Yeah, I've got helical carbide in my joiner, and the fence is in the same position for like 18 months at this point. And that's an indicator of when that section of knives gets dull, I move the fence. So in a year or a year and a half, I haven't had to move the fence. So, and Dave's comment is noteworthy when he said, now I can do man-made material. So if you have tool steel knives in your jointer, you should not be jointing MDF, particle board, plywood, plexiglass, plastic laminate, anything that's not just directly from a tree. You shouldn't joint because it's really abrasive, because those materials are so abrasive and hard on the knives. So a big advantage to switching to carbide is you can basically joint anything.
And you don't have to set those knives just right with your outfitting table, which is always
they're just socketed. And then they get dull, you turn them 90 degrees, it's insert tooling, it's a wonderful thing. You know what, if we have time at the end, which we probably will, we'll send Ginny over there to show them the head on that one for people that aren't familiar with what we're talking about. I have a 12-inch table saw with a 5/8 arbor. Can I use a 10-inch blade on it? Are there any safety concerns? Here's my lesson out of this. I've used 7 1/4 and 8-inch blades on my 10-inch saw.
Yeah, I mean my dado set is smaller than 10-inch.
Yeah.
I don't see that there'd be any difficulty.
No, I think you'd be fine. I don't think there's any issues with that at all.
If you can get a 10-inch with a 5/8 arbor, they're usually 1/2 inch, aren't they?
On a 10-inch blade?
Yeah. No, they're 5/8.
5/8. It's the same. And viewers, so this is cool. All over the United States, Sam says, which is standard operation procedure, plus Bolivia, rural Colombia, multiple Canadian locales, that's your family watching, because Dave's originally from Canada, and Kyoto, Japan. So that's very interesting. All right, I'm going to scroll quick, and what are you doing? Ginny's making
waving at everybody.
funny things on it. Ginny's excited. She's leaving the country in 6 days. Ginny's going to be 4 weeks in Taiwan with school.
Wow.
So she is champing at the bit to get moving. All right, Ginny, let's head you to the jointer, and we'll show them what a helical head, what Dave and I are talking about here. Kind of a low light situation. Yes, ma'am. I'm going to unplug. If you come from here, Jenny, you're going to be better off, so you can see that's where we're going. So, is this basically the look of yours, Dave? Is it similar?
Yes.
So what Dave and I were rambling on and on and on about there was, this is insert tooling. Each of those is a carbide insert, and four-sided. When one edge gets dull, you loosen this, simply turn it, and then you're good to go again. These are carbide, not tool steel, so that when we were talking about the ability to cut man-made materials, that's the gain there. And then we also have the helical cutter head. And what's the deal with the helix, Dave? You can back out again, Ginny, thanks. Go on, Dave, because he's going to talk a little bit.
Oh, the helix that gives you a shear cut, so you're not just having a big knife taking one chunk out all at once. So there's a bunch of little knives doing it at an angle, just like you would a skewed chisel. So it makes for a much cleaner, less tear out in your cut.
I've really been amazed when I do. We'll head back for the bench, Ginny. When I do face jointing, the quality of cut that comes off of this is incredible.
It's quite nice. And if you have figured wood, it does a very nice job.
Yep.
The one thing you'll notice on a joiner, though, is it takes more feed pressure to get it through a helical.
All right, well, one of the things we want to do to wrap up here is, again, thank Titebond. Ginny brought us some props here. Thanks to our sponsor, Titebond, for helping to underwrite this so that it stays free for you guys. Thanks for watching literally from all over the world tonight. Any parting words of wisdom from you, Dave? So here's a question I get all the time, and I'm kind of surprised we didn't get it tonight. New woodworker, what kind of project should I start on? And what's your answer to that?
Well, I would start small. I see a lot of people they're very gung-ho and they just want to build some big magnificent thing. I would just start with a small box. Even something like this would be, a good thing to start out with. Start small, work your way up.
Okay. My common thing with people is pick something you like. So don't let me say, well, you should start by building a cabinet for shoes, because maybe you have no interest in a shoe cabinet and you're not going to enjoy making that project and you're not going to want to learn to do it. So I would reverse engineer based on something you need, something you really want to, something you're going to enjoy making, and then go from there. Anything else?
I don't think so. Just
all right.
Keep woodworking and keep practicing and have fun doing it. I mean, that's the main thing.
And doesn't the hour go by fast?
It does go by.
It just zings right by. All right, well, thanks to everybody for watching. Our next one is in January. I believe it's the 11th of January. It's always I might have screwed that up. Don't hold me to the date. Second Thursday of the month, 7 p.m. Central Time. We will be back here, not necessarily Dave, unfortunately, but I'll be here. Ginny will be in Taiwan. I need a substitute camera person for that. Other than that, peace out, baby.
So long.